What is a paranormal experience you've had? My family has a cabin next to a lake in Vermont that we spend time at in the summer. One night, while sleeping in the upstairs bedroom, I hear what sounds like someone getting up to go to the bathroom. It was coming from right across the hallway outside my door, so I assumed it was my mom. Usual occurrence. Oddly enough, no lights went on, and no bathroom noises. The sound of footsteps just stopped. A minute later, I had this odd feeling that someone was standing at the half-open door to my bedroom, watching me. This feeling went on for minutes until all of a sudden the feeling of someone standing by the door turned into the feeling of someone standing directly over the bed. For the next 5 minutes, I had the terrible feeling that someone/something was looming over me with their face mere inches from mine. The 5 minutes or so seemed to last forever. Suddenly, as soon as the feeling started, it abruptly ended. No retreating footsteps, no noise at all. Whatever it was just gone. The next morning, my family and I are eating breakfast at the table, and I still couldn't shake the feeling. Then my sister spoke up and asked, "Mom, what time was it that you got up to go to the bathroom last night? I could hear you up and walking around from the downstairs bedroom." Confused, my mom said that she never got up last night. My brother laughed and said, "Mom, we all heard you." Then my dad piped up and said, "No, your mom never got up." I didn't either. That's when I shared my experience. Freaked everyone out. Back in 1984, when I was 10 years old, I was out shopping with my mother when she suddenly all but collapsed. Some people and I helped her to a nearby seat, and after a few seconds she turned to me and said, "Your grandmother has died." We went home, a 30-minute drive, and upon arrival she learned that her mother had indeed died half an hour before. To this day it's the only inexplicable thing I've ever witnessed, but I have no doubt in my mind that there was some sort of link between the two of them that was broken that day. My sister and I shared a room when we were tweens, and we both swore that it was haunted. We'd hear strange sounds and see weird stuff out of the corner of our eye. There was also an oppressive feeling of something very wrong once the sun went down. My sister and I were way too old to be afraid of the dark, and we were fine with darkness anywhere else. Eventually, my sister refused to sleep in the room. Mom, of course, didn't think there was any possible way we had ghosts and thought this whole thing was ridiculous. Until we went to summer camp. We came gone to this story from our mom. We had been gone for a couple of nights. Our dad was working graveyard, so mom had the house to herself. She was getting ready for bed and heard laughter from our room. She heard it a few times before it struck her that we weren't there. Mom checked the room and the lights were on. Mom tried to convince herself that she was imagining things and turned the lights off. She heard the laughter again and she went to check again. The lights were on again. Mom instinctively just said, "You kids go to bed," and she didn't hear them anymore. After that, mom believed us, but we were still kind of stuck with the room. It was an old house that we had while we were saving up for a better place. My sister adopted a cat which helped for some reason, but it was months before the cat would go into our room without flipping out. Like literally ears pinned back, growling, hissing, and bolting out of the room like a bullet. We eventually were able to move to a nice home, and even mom was too happy to leave. I used to see a little boy in the corner of my room mostly at nighttime when I was about 13. I could see and sense that he wasn't a living human being and his clothes were really old-fashioned. I was never really scared because he always had a positive energy around him. Can't really explain it. I talked to him sometimes and he told me his name, etc. Can't really remember any of the things he told me anymore. But the most interesting thing happened during a fight between me and my mom. My cousin and her mother were visiting us at the moment, and I had never told them about this boy, since ghosts aren't really a light discussion over dinner kind of thing. At some point I had had enough of the fight and got out, slammed the door behind me, and for some reason went to a parking garage under our house to chill and cool down for a few hours. My mom, cousin, and aunt went looking after me, and eventually found me. My cousin told me that she had got the idea to look from the parking garage after she had seen a young blonde boy with weird clothes standing by a fence that was right next to a door to the garage. She told me that the boy just stood there, and when he got her attention he jumped over the fence and disappeared. Only that behind the fence there was a thick bush full of big thorns and there is no way a little boy would have just jumped in it, and let alone not make a sound, after getting stabbed by the thorns. I quiz my friendly ghost wanted to help. I worked at a haunted house and once when looking down the hall of one of our actor exits, there stood a figure, like an all black somewhat transparent silhouette of a human standing, motionless in front of me. I stayed at the hall entrance and called my boss over and asked her to look down the hall, but didn't give any indication that I saw anything, so I wouldn't give her a false impression. When she looked, her expression was pure cold fear. "Who the fuck is that?" she said. I told her, "I don't know, but you see him to right. I see through him. Who the fuck is that?" And before I could say anything more, it came full sprint at us. My boss screamed and ran away, but I was curious what it would do, so I stayed. It got right up to my face and just stopped, inches away from my nose, then suddenly dissipated into thin air. I still occasionally see my boss, and she confirms every time that we saw the same thing, and thinks I was an idiot for staying, but at the same time, it was cool. Back in college, I was an officer in a student org. Each week, after our allotted time and the student union was up, we'd head to an unlocked lecture hall to keep hanging out. This particular night, most everyone had left. There were just 4 of us remaining, sitting on top of the first row of desks, shooting the shit, making plans. It was sometime between 10:30 and 11 when we heard what sounded like scratching and tapping in the upper right hand corner of the hall. There was a door up there that was usually locked from the outside, so we figured it was someone on the other side, maybe trying to get in, whatever. Well, the sound didn't stop, it kept on, and it seemed to move along the back wall, and we all started to get this very strange feeling, like the air was being sucked out of the room. Gotta be our minds playing tricks on us, right? Or maybe a small animal got let in at some point, who knows? 2 of us decided to go up and check out that corner. We got about halfway up the stairs when the air in the room changed again. It's difficult for me to describe, especially since it was so long ago, but it sort of felt the way it does right before a storm, like there's static and pressure and tension. We froze. I heard one of the 2 who'd stayed down at the front let out a yelp, and then the tension broke, and this wave of something crashed over us. It made my stomach twist and flip. We turned and ran down the stairs. The others had scrambled off the desks and had backed up to the door, and we all rushed out of it together, completely spooked. Once outside, they told us they'd seen streaks of light shooting out of the corner right before the wave hit. No clue what it could have been. Maybe some sort of electrical discharge, I don't know. But it's the closest thing I've had to an honest to goodness paranormal experience. I once had a dragonfly communicate with me basically telepathically. I was out in the swamp on my friend's boat while we looked for salvage. We took a break and were just sort of sitting dead in the water and enjoying the view when a big blue dragonfly zoomed up right in front of my face and hovered there. At that moment I felt the word "stay there" almost like pushed into my head. It definitely didn't feel like my own thought. And immediately the dragonfly zooms at my face and I feel a sharp pain on my cheek. I look down, and the dragonfly had come to rest on the life jacket on the seat next to me with a biting fly in his little hands. He was just chillin' and eating its face. The dragonfly told me to stay still and grabbed the fly off my face right as it bit me and then sat next to me for lunch. It was absolutely surreal. One night my sister and I saw a black figure poke its head around a wall in our house looking at us. We were the only ones home. There were times I would hear children laughing when none were around. I've heard muffled voices coming from our TV when it was turned off. After I moved out of our house, my mom and sister woke up to one of the dining room chairs pushed up to the kitchen sink like someone who couldn't reach the sink would need. A few days before I had my daughter, my grandmother had emergency surgery and didn't wake up from it until a week later. She never really recovered from it, but did tell some of my cousins that she died when my daughter was born, and then said she saw us driving home from the hospital. She had details she couldn't possibly know. She died a month after I had my daughter. Everyone in our family knows that when you die, you let everyone alive know you are okay. People get visited in dreams. I was visited by both grandmothers and my sister was visited by our grandfather. They are very different from dreams and have left us very shaken and comforted. When I was about 11 I woke up in the middle of the night. BC my blanket had slid off me. I looked to the side of my bed and an old man was sitting there, wearing a nice coat and a hat. He smiled at me and pulled the covers back over me. I felt cozy and somehow wasn't scared. I fell back asleep. When I woke up I told my mom what happened. She asked me to describe the man in detail. She told me he sounded just like my grandfather, who I'd never met. She was way more disturbed by it than I was, as the caring feeling I had was not at all the experience she had growing up. Unfortunately, I saw auras as a child, like washes of colors around people. I thought everyone did and no one talked about it. When I started to tell people, or mention it in passing, they kind of laughed and looked at me weird. It went away shortly after that. Oh, and I saw a celestial being once. I was very small, around 4, and we were on holiday in Italy. My mom was sitting behind me on some steps, and I remember thinking the sun from behind her was so bright. But then I thought that couldn't be. BC the sun was in front of me. I looked back and there was a figure standing behind my mom, person sized. The body was kind of blurred. Its face was pure yellow light. It was like looking into the sun. It was such a strange and surreal experience, and I remember it vividly, even now that I'm almost 30. At the time I just said there's someone behind you, and when my mom looked back it was gone.